One frequent objection to the Bible is that it contains contradictions. A primary target of these objections is the four Gospels. The Gospels get a lot of attention because they are four different discussions of the life of Jesus. Because they teach about the same person's life and frequently the same events in his life, we are able to compare the Gospels with one another to see if their stories agree. If they contain factual errors or genuine contradictions, then they cannot be trusted, and ultimately, the entire Bible cannot be trusted. I am Dave Chambers, the pastor of Manistic Bible Church. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John present accounts of Jesus' life that do vary at times. Some include details that others leave out. Some have details that appear to contradict the details in others. Are the four Gospels trustworthy and accurate accounts of Jesus' life? Or can valid and reasonable explanations be given for the apparent contradictions? One such contradiction is found early in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. The Gospel of Matthew opens with the genealogy of Jesus that starts with Abraham and ends with Mary's husband, Joseph. The third chapter of Luke ends with the genealogy of Jesus that starts with Joseph and goes all the way back to Adam. The two lists of names are significantly different. This is indisputable. From David to Joseph, the two genealogies have almost no names in common, and even the names they have in common are in different places in the list. Matthew and Luke present two entirely different family trees for Jesus. Is this not a clear contradiction? The genealogies in Matthew and Luke do not contradict each other. The explanation of the differences between the two genealogies is quite simple and reasonable. The Gospel of Matthew records Jesus' legal genealogy as the son of Joseph. The Gospel of Luke records Jesus' biological genealogy as the son of Mary. Though Jewish genealogies were generally traced through the father, in Jesus' case, the family tree of Mary is important because he had no human father. His biological relationship to David, Judah, Israel, and Abraham was as important as his legal relationship to them. Therefore, Luke gives Jesus' biological family tree. Matthew is concerned to show that Jesus is a legitimate heir to the throne of David. Therefore, he gives Jesus' legal family tree. Another apparent contradiction in the Gospels is Luke's failure to mention the escape to Egypt. The wise men traveled to Jerusalem seeking the newborn king of the Jews. They went to the palace of Herod the Great before being sent to Bethlehem. Herod later took steps to eliminate this infant he perceived to be a threat to his power. Herod commanded all babies in and around Bethlehem be killed. However, before this happened, an angel appeared to Joseph and told him to lead his family to Egypt. So the Gospel of Matthew says Joseph took Mary and Jesus to Egypt, where they remained until after the death of Herod the Great. The time in Egypt could have been as brief as a few weeks or as long as a year. However, Luke's Gospel says nothing about the trip to Egypt. Luke appears to say that Jesus' family went directly from Jerusalem to Nazareth. Some question why a careful historian like Luke would omit something as significant as the flight to Egypt. Others accuse Matthew or Luke of being in error. A simple explanation for this difference is available. The four Gospels each have a clear and distinct purpose for their writing. Luke states his purpose at the beginning of the Gospel. He wrote to give assurance of the truths taught about Jesus, the Savior of the world. Luke's selection of events to include is driven by that purpose. Now, Matthew does not directly state his purpose, but his emphases in the book lead to the conclusion Matthew is showing the Jews that Jesus is their promised Messiah. The flight to Egypt is a valuable piece of evidence in Matthew. By fleeing to Egypt and then later coming up out of Egypt, Jesus mimics the history of Israel. Matthew's inclusion of that trip to Egypt shows Jesus' close relationship with his own people. Luke does not record this trip because it would have meant little to his intended audience and would not have furthered his purpose. None of the Gospels are intended to give strict histories or biographies of Jesus. They are all communicating a message and calling for a response, not just reciting facts of history. Consequently, they compress the timeline of Jesus' life by leaving out certain events. They even rearrange the order of events in Jesus' life. By saying that Jesus' family left Jerusalem and returned to Nazareth, Luke is not deceptive or in error. Luke is not giving an itinerary of all Jesus' journeys as a juvenile. Luke is moving to the next important point in his gospel and omitting those things which do not serve the purpose of the book. Many of the supposed contradictions between the gospels have reasonable explanations, particularly when you remember the gospels are not biographies. They are accurate eyewitness accounts of Jesus written to show that he is God and Savior. If you have further questions about the apparent contradictions in the Gospels, you can find answers at everlastingtruths.com. There you can also ask your questions or subscribe for more biblical answers to your questions.